Have you ever found yourself feeling drained, upset, or completely off balance after spending time with someone? Maybe it's that person who always seems to make you feel uncomfortable, or even worse, downright uneasy. They don't even have to say much. It's more about the energy they carry, the way they make you feel. You know the type, always critical, always negative, and somehow, you leave their presence feeling like a part of you has been taken away. It's like they have the ability to suck the life out of you without lifting a finger, and yet, somehow, we often ignore it, thinking it's just us, or that it's normal. But what if I told you it's not just in your head? What if I told you that? According to Zen and Buddhist teachings, there are clear signs that help us identify when someone around us is carrying toxic, negative energy, when their presence starts to affect your peace of mind, your happiness, and even your spiritual growth. The truth is, we all encounter these people, and often, we don't even realize the impact they have on us until it's too late. In today's video, we're going to dive deep into the 9 most evident signs that there's an evil person next to you, someone whose energy can cause harm in ways you may not even fully understand. But here's the key. It's not about identifying these toxic people just for the sake of knowing. It's about learning how to protect yourself, how to find peace amidst chaos, how to stay grounded, and how to safeguard your spiritual and emotional well-being. We'll be exploring all of this, with powerful lessons drawn from Zen and Buddhist wisdom. So, if you're ready to uncover the truth and take control of your peace, keep watching, because the signs are clear, and the tools to protect yourself are already within your reach. You just need to know where to look. I've been there, the feeling of being drained, confused, or completely off balance after spending time with someone. At one point in my life, I allowed someone's toxic energy to seep into my world. It didn't happen overnight, but gradually, I began to notice subtle shifts in my own behavior. I became more anxious, uncertain, and even started doubting myself, but I couldn't quite understand why. The shifts were so gradual that it took time for me to pinpoint the root cause. It was almost as if the energy around me had slowly morphed into something foreign, something dark, without me even noticing. I remember moments when I'd leave a conversation feeling emotionally exhausted, my thoughts tangled, and my sense of self diminished. I wondered why I felt so unsettled, why everything felt harder than it should. I thought it was just a phase, that maybe I was overthinking or being overly sensitive. But deep down, something didn't feel right. I spent months in that state of confusion, riding an emotional roller coaster, unsure of where to place the blame. The truth was, I had unknowingly allowed someone else's negative energy to take root in my life, affecting not just my thoughts, but my mood, my choices, and even my actions. And this person wasn't even necessarily cruel or overtly malicious. No, they were just subtle in their toxicity. They had a way of undermining me, of making me question my instincts, my thoughts, and even my worth. Their negativity was like a slow, creeping fog that clouded my judgment, leaving me feeling powerless to escape. But I couldn't identify it at first. I didn't know how to see what I couldn't yet name. It wasn't until I started looking deeper into the wisdom of Buddhism and Zen that everything began to make sense. I remember sitting in silence, meditating one evening, when it dawned on me. The teachings of the Buddha and Zen masters offered me a new lens through which to view my life and relationships. I started to reflect on my experiences from a place of mindfulness, taking note of the patterns I had failed to recognize before. I began to understand that negative energy is not always overt. It doesn't always announce itself with loud words or actions. Sometimes, it slips in quietly, disguised in small gestures, in subtle remarks, in the undertones of seemingly innocent conversations. The more I studied, the more I realized that there were clear signs to watch for, early warning signs, if you will, that could help me recognize when someone was affecting my energy. It became clear to me that the Buddha's teachings on attachment, desire, and suffering were directly related to these toxic dynamics. I understood that the root of suffering lies in attachment, in clinging to desires, to expectations, to control, and I saw how these toxic relationships were a reflection of those very attachments, both the other person's and my own. As I dug deeper, I learned that mindfulness and awareness could give me the power to protect myself from such negativity. The Buddha taught that we should remain aware of our thoughts and emotions, observing them without attachment. This practice of detachment, of recognizing negative emotions without becoming consumed by them, gave me the clarity to see toxic behaviors for what they were. No longer did I get caught up in the confusion of trying to fix or explain the situation. Instead, I could step back and evaluate it from a place of awareness and non-attachment. This newfound understanding was transformative. It was like a veil was lifted, and I could see the relationships in my life in a whole new light. I began to recognize toxic traits much earlier, long before they had a chance to take root and cause harm. I realized that I didn't have to wait until I felt drained or overwhelmed to make a change. The more I practiced mindfulness, the more I could identify those subtle signs of imbalance, of negativity, and of emotional manipulation. And more importantly, I learned how to protect my peace. Buddhism teaches us that peace comes from within, and that external circumstances should not be the source of our inner state. This principle became my anchor in moments of uncertainty. I learned to cultivate my inner peace as a foundation, so that when I encountered negativity or toxic people, I didn't lose myself in their chaos. I could recognize their behavior for what it was, something that didn't belong in my life, and choose to maintain my peace regardless of their actions. It wasn't about being passive or avoiding difficult conversations. It was about understanding that my mental and emotional well-being are sacred, and that I have a responsibility to protect them. Setting boundaries with toxic people wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was an act of self-compassion. I realized that by allowing negative influences to persist, I was betraying myself. I was letting my own peace be compromised in the name of obligation, of trying to be nice, or of fearing conflict. But through the teachings of Zen, I came to understand that true compassion isn't about sacrificing oneself for others. True compassion is about honoring your own well-being while still extending kindness and understanding to others. It's about striking a balance, protecting your peace while remaining compassionate, but never at the cost of your own mental health. As I continued to apply these principles, I noticed a shift in the way I interacted with people. I stopped taking things personally when others acted out of fear, insecurity, or jealousy. I stopped letting their negativity define me. I stopped allowing their toxic behavior to have any power over me. Instead, I started responding with clarity, with compassion, and most importantly, with boundaries. I began to trust myself more, to honor my intuition, and to value my peace above all else. This transformation wasn't always easy, but it was incredibly empowering. And as I applied the principles of Zen and Buddhism to these situations, I felt stronger and more centered. I realized that these teachings could not only help me navigate difficult relationships, but could also empower others to do the same. Today, I'm excited to share with you what I've learned, because I know that by recognizing toxic traits early and learning to protect our peace, we can live more fulfilled, balanced, and joyful lives. By learning to trust ourselves and honor our boundaries, we can reclaim our energy and move through the world with greater clarity and strength. We all deserve to be surrounded by people who uplift us, who encourage us to grow, and who nourish our souls. By recognizing toxic behavior and setting the necessary boundaries, we take the first step toward protecting our peace and cultivating relationships that truly support our well-being. It's a journey, and it requires patience, awareness, and self-compassion. But with the wisdom of Buddhism and Zen guiding us, we can learn to navigate even the most challenging relationships with grace and strength. And in doing so, we create a life that's not only free from negativity, but one that is full of peace, love, and genuine connection. 1. They manipulate your emotions. It's incredibly easy to fall into the trap of emotional manipulation, especially when we're not aware of the signs. Emotional manipulation is like a slow, insidious form of control that doesn't always present itself clearly, which makes it harder to recognize. It often begins with small, seemingly harmless comments that are designed to make you feel guilty, angry, or sad, even when you've done nothing wrong. A toxic person might make you feel as though you're always in the wrong, no matter what you do. They might shift the blame onto you when something goes wrong, subtly implying that you're not good enough or that you failed them in some way. Over time, this type of emotional manipulation erodes your sense of self and makes you second-guess your own feelings and actions. When I look back at some of my own toxic relationships, I can now see how these emotional manipulations crept in unnoticed. I'd leave a conversation feeling like I'd done something wrong, but when I took a step back, I realized that the other person had subtly shifted the blame onto me. I'd find myself apologizing for things I wasn't even responsible for, trying to fix situations that weren't mine to fix. This is a clear example of emotional manipulation. When someone twists your reality to serve their own needs, making you feel small and powerless. The Buddhist teachings on desire and ignorance offer valuable insight into this behavior. In Buddhism, desire is seen as one of the root causes of suffering, because when we cling to things or people out of attachment, we lose our peace. Toxic people manipulate your emotions because they are driven by their own desires. Whether it's a desire for control, validation, or power, they want to impose their version of reality on you, which keeps you in a state of confusion and dependency. By recognizing emotional manipulation as a form of attachment, we can break free from the chains that bind us. The Buddha teaches that by letting go of attachments, we protect our inner peace and gain clarity. Recognizing emotional manipulation in others can be life-changing. Once you understand that you don't have to accept these emotional games, you can detach from the situation with greater ease and confidence. The most important thing to remember is that your feelings are valid. No one should make you feel guilty for having them or for expressing them. Protecting your emotional boundaries begins with understanding that you deserve to be treated with respect, kindness, and compassion, without someone trying to twist your emotions to suit their needs. 2. They never take responsibility. A toxic person's inability to take responsibility for their actions is another clear sign that you're dealing with someone who is emotionally unhealthy. This kind of person will do anything to avoid accountability for their own behavior. Instead of owning up to their mistakes, they'll make excuses, blame others, or even gaslight you into thinking you're the one at fault. They never seem to learn or grow from their actions. And this constant lack of accountability creates a toxic dynamic in your relationship. I've encountered people like this in my own life, and it took me a while to realize the pattern. It often starts with small things, missed appointments, broken promises, or hurtful comments. When you confront them about their actions, they deflect the blame onto someone else or justify their behavior by saying things like, "I didn't mean to," or "You don't understand what I'm going through." These responses don't take responsibility. Instead, they shift the focus away from the hurtful actions and onto excuses. The Zen teachings offer profound wisdom on this issue. Zen emphasizes the importance of humility and self-awareness. In Zen, owning up to your actions, both the good and the bad, is considered a path toward enlightenment. The practice of acknowledging our flaws is a sign of growth, of self-awareness, and of maturity. Humility is not about self-criticism, but about accepting responsibility with grace and without blame. When we take responsibility for our actions, we can grow and learn. However, toxic people refuse to own their mistakes because they are often too insecure to face their own shortcomings. Instead, they perpetuate a cycle of blame, which only keeps them stuck in their negative patterns. In relationships, this lack of responsibility creates an imbalance. You end up carrying the emotional weight of their actions, constantly making excuses for them or trying to smooth things over, when in reality, they should be the ones taking accountability. This dynamic leaves you feeling frustrated and emotionally drained because no matter what you do, it feels like you're the only one trying to fix things. Over time, this erodes the trust and respect between you. In Buddhist philosophy, we are taught to take responsibility for our actions because it's only by understanding our behavior that we can improve. Taking responsibility isn't about self-blame. It's about owning the impact our actions have on others. By practicing mindfulness and reflection, we can learn to make more conscious choices and avoid harming others. Toxic people, on the other hand, avoid this process of reflection because they're too focused on protecting their own ego. When they refuse to take responsibility, they keep you trapped in a never-ending cycle of emotional chaos. Recognizing when someone is not taking responsibility is important because it helps you decide whether to continue investing in the relationship. If someone is unwilling to acknowledge their mistakes, it's likely that they won't be able to grow or change. In this case, it's best to protect your emotional well-being by setting clear boundaries and walking away. You can't carry the burden of someone else's lack of accountability forever, and it's not your job to fix them. 3. They constantly criticize you. Another clear sign of a toxic person is their tendency to constantly criticize you, often in a way that feels more like an attack than constructive feedback. It's as if they're always pointing out what you're doing wrong, whether it's your choices, your actions, or even the way you think. At first, this might feel like concern or advice, but over time, you begin to feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. The constant criticism starts to chip away at your confidence and self-worth. In my own experience, this kind of criticism felt like a heavy weight on my shoulders. Every time I tried to share something I was proud of, or made a decision I felt good about, the person would find a way to undermine it. They'd belittle my achievements, make sarcastic comments, or even directly criticize my efforts. It wasn't about offering constructive feedback, it was about making me feel inferior. This behavior left me feeling deflated and unsure of myself, constantly questioning my worth. Buddhist teachings encourage us to practice compassion, both for others and for ourselves. In Buddhism, harmful speech, whether it's criticism, gossip, or insult, is seen as a source of suffering. When we criticize others in a harmful way, we create negative karma for ourselves and cause suffering for others. If someone is constantly criticizing you, it's a clear indication that they are not practicing the principles of compassion and right speech. Instead, they are projecting their own insecurities and dissatisfaction onto you. Zen wisdom teaches us to observe our thoughts and speech with mindfulness. Criticism is often a reflection of the critic's own inner turmoil. A person who is constantly criticizing others is rarely at peace with themselves. They are projecting their own negative feelings, their own fears and frustrations, onto the people around them. This type of behavior is rooted in the ego, the need to feel superior, to place others down in order to lift themselves up. When you're the target of constant criticism, it's easy to start internalizing these negative comments. You begin to doubt your decisions, your abilities, and your worth. But it's essential to remember that these criticisms say more about the other person than they do about you. A truly compassionate person would lift you up, not tear you down. If someone is always criticizing you, they are not acting from a place of kindness or understanding. They are acting from a place of fear, insecurity, and control. The most powerful thing you can do when faced with constant criticism is to detach from it. Understand that the other person's words are a reflection of their own struggles, not a reflection of your value. This doesn't mean you should ignore constructive feedback, but it does mean that you should protect yourself from harmful, negative comments. Set boundaries with people who criticize you relentlessly, and remember that your worth is not defined by their opinions. 4. They create drama. Toxic people thrive on drama. They seem to make everything more complicated than it needs to be, stirring up conflicts, creating chaos, and making every situation feel like a crisis. Drama isn't just about creating conflict, it's about creating unnecessary turbulence that drains everyone involved. These individuals seem to feed off of drama, constantly seeking attention and excitement, even if it means upsetting the people around them. In my experience, drama created by toxic people can feel like being on a constant emotional roller coaster. One minute, everything seems fine, and the next minute, there's a new crisis or conflict to deal with. These people love to make mountains out of molehills, turning small misunderstandings into full-blown arguments. They thrive on the chaos, and their behavior often leaves everyone around them feeling confused, upset, and emotionally exhausted. Zen philosophy teaches us the importance of simplicity and clarity. The path to peace is often found in simplicity. By simplifying our thoughts, actions, and relationships, we can cultivate greater harmony. Drama, on the other hand, complicates everything. It clouds our judgment, stirs up unnecessary emotions, and distracts us from what truly matters. Toxic people create drama because they are unable to live in a state of calm and balance. Instead, they are constantly seeking external validation and excitement. And drama is one way they achieve that. If you find yourself constantly caught in the drama of someone else's life, it's important to recognize that this is not normal. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding, not on constant conflict. Drama is a sign that something deeper is wrong in the relationship, and it's a clear warning sign that you need to set boundaries and create distance from the person who is stirring up chaos. In Buddhism, we are encouraged to live in harmony with others and to avoid causing harm. Creating drama is a form of harm, not just to the people involved, but to ourselves as well. When we are constantly involved in conflict and turmoil, we lose our peace of mind and energy. Drama drains our emotional reserves and takes us away from the true path of inner peace. The best way to handle a person who thrives on drama is to disengage from their chaos. Don't let their need for drama pull you into unnecessary conflicts. Practice mindfulness and detachment. Focus on keeping your own peace and refuse to be swept away by the emotional storms they create. Over time, you'll find that by refusing to participate in their drama, you can maintain your balance and peace. 5. They are self-centered. A self-centered person sees the world through the lens of their own needs and desires. They are rarely concerned with anyone else's feelings, and everything revolves around them. This type of person is incredibly selfish, and their actions are driven by a need for validation, attention, and control. They rarely consider how their behavior affects those around them and will go to great lengths to ensure that their needs are met, even at the expense of others. In toxic relationships, a self-centered person will make you feel like you're always giving, always sacrificing, but never receiving. They are quick to demand attention and affection, but slow to offer it in return. They often expect others to cater to their needs, without any regard for the other person's emotions or circumstances. Over time, this creates an imbalance, leaving you feeling exhausted and unappreciated. Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of compassion and selflessness. The Buddha taught that by practicing generosity and kindness, we free ourselves from the shackles of the ego. When we let go of our attachment to self, we can begin to live in harmony with others. Self-centered people, however, are trapped by their egos. They see others as tools to fulfill their desires and needs, rather than as individuals with their own feelings and needs. In relationships, self-centeredness is toxic because it creates a dynamic of one-sidedness. The other person becomes more like an object to be used, rather than a partner to be respected. When you're involved with a self-centered person, you may find yourself constantly giving without receiving anything in return. This creates an unhealthy power dynamic where one person is always in control, and the other is left feeling depleted. Recognizing self-centered behavior is important because it helps you protect your energy and emotional well-being. In healthy relationships, both people contribute equally. Both people give and take. If you find yourself always giving while the other person takes, it's time to reassess the relationship. Protect your boundaries and practice self-care, because your needs matter too. 6. They are judgmental. Judgmental people are quick to criticize, condemn, and label others based on their own biased views. They are not open-minded or compassionate. Instead, they make harsh, sweeping judgments about people and situations. These individuals seem to think that their way of thinking is the only valid one, and they are quick to impose their beliefs and opinions on others without any room for discussion or understanding. Being in the presence of judgmental people can feel suffocating, as their constant criticism creates a toxic atmosphere where nothing is ever good enough. This behavior can make you feel self-conscious and uncertain about yourself, constantly wondering if you're being judged or criticized for every little thing you do. It creates an atmosphere of fear and insecurity, where you're always walking on eggshells around them. The Buddhist teachings emphasize non-judgment and compassion. We are encouraged to see others as they truly are, without imposing labels or assumptions. Judgment comes from the ego, from the need to compare and categorize people in order to feel superior. But true wisdom comes from seeing beyond the surface and understanding that everyone is on their own unique path. By practicing mindfulness and compassion, we learn to accept others without judgment, recognizing their inherent worth and potential. If you're constantly in the presence of judgmental people, it's essential to create emotional distance. Their judgments are reflections of their own insecurities and fears, not truths about you or anyone else. Don't internalize their criticisms. Instead, practice self-compassion and remind yourself that your worth is not determined by someone else's opinions. We all have different paths and experiences, and that's something to be honored, not criticized. 7. They gaslight you. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes you question your own reality, memory, or perception of events. A gaslighter will make you doubt your own experiences, often telling you that you're overreacting, imagining things, or that something didn't happen the way you remember it. Over time, this constant distortion of reality can lead you to feel confused, insecure, and powerless. I've had experiences with gaslighting that left me feeling lost and disoriented. I'd remember situations differently, but the toxic person would insist that I was wrong, even when I was certain of my recollection. They might say, "You're just being too sensitive," or "that never happened." The repeated questioning of my own memory and feelings created a deep sense of self-doubt and made me question my sanity at times. Buddhist teachings emphasize mindfulness and awareness, encouraging us to stay grounded in the present moment and trust our perceptions. Gaslighting is an attempt to distort your reality and detach you from your own understanding of the world. In Buddhism, we are reminded to trust our inner wisdom and stay connected to our sense of truth. When others try to manipulate your perceptions, it's essential to remain centered in your own mind and recognize when someone is trying to twist your reality. Gaslighting can make you feel isolated as you start to question yourself, but the key to breaking free from it is remembering that your feelings and experiences are valid. You are not crazy, and your perspective matters. If someone is gaslighting you, it's essential to protect your mental well-being by recognizing the manipulation and seeking support from people who can help you regain clarity and confidence. 8. They make you feel responsible for their happiness. A toxic person often places the burden of their happiness on others, making you feel like you're the one responsible for their emotional well-being. They may express dissatisfaction with their life, and instead of taking responsibility for their own happiness, they'll make you feel as though it's your job to fix things. This can be incredibly draining, as it creates a one-sided dynamic where you are constantly trying to make them happy while neglecting your own needs. In a toxic relationship, you may find yourself always trying to cheer the other person up, offering emotional support, and adjusting your behavior to meet their needs. But no matter what you do, it's never enough. They'll still expect more from you, as though their happiness is something you can control. This creates an unhealthy dynamic, where your life revolves around their mood and emotional state. Buddhism teaches that true happiness comes from within. It's not dependent on external circumstances or other people. In fact, one of the key principles of Buddhism is understanding that suffering is caused by attachment and the desire for things to be a certain way. When someone places their happiness solely in your hands, they are essentially attaching their well-being to something external, which will always lead to suffering. They are not taking responsibility for their own happiness. And this is a form of emotional manipulation. When you're in a relationship with someone who makes you responsible for their happiness, it's essential to recognize that this is an unrealistic and unhealthy expectation. You cannot control someone else's emotions, and it's not your job to make them happy. In fact, by enabling this behavior, you may be reinforcing their inability to take responsibility for their own emotional state. Setting boundaries and learning to prioritize your own emotional health is crucial when dealing with someone who expects you to bear the weight of their happiness. You are not responsible for their feelings, and it's important to communicate this in a compassionate but firm way. Encourage them to seek happiness within themselves, through their own actions and mindset, rather than expecting it from you. 9. They are constantly victimizing themselves. A toxic person often sees themselves as a perpetual victim of circumstances, constantly blaming the world, other people, or even you for their problems. They seem to be stuck in a cycle of feeling sorry for themselves, and no matter how much support or love you give, they never seem to move forward. They see themselves as helpless, powerless, and unable to change their situation. This victim mentality can be incredibly draining, as it makes everything about their suffering and puts all the responsibility on others to fix it. I've witnessed this kind of behavior in my own life, where someone would constantly talk about how unfair life was to them, how they were always mistreated, and how things never went their way. No matter how many times you offer advice or try to help, they would stay stuck in their victim story, refusing to take any action to change their circumstances. It becomes exhausting because you feel like you're endlessly pouring energy into someone who isn't willing to help themselves. Buddhist teachings remind us that we all have the ability to change our circumstances through our thoughts, actions, and intentions. The idea of victimhood is in direct opposition to the Buddhist principle of self-empowerment. In Buddhism, we understand that suffering is a part of life, but how we respond to it determines whether it becomes a path to wisdom or a cycle of despair. When someone constantly plays the victim, they are relinquishing their power to change their situation, and instead, they stay stuck in their suffering. The victim mentality is rooted in attachment to one's own suffering. Instead of accepting the impermanence of life and working to change their situation, toxic people dwell on their pain, which only perpetuates their suffering. They hold on to their story of victimhood, making it difficult to break free from the cycle of negativity. If you're dealing with someone who constantly victimizes themselves, it's important to recognize that they are not taking responsibility for their own life. While it's natural to feel empathy for others who are struggling, it's also crucial to set boundaries and not get pulled into their perpetual cycle of self-pity. Offer support, but don't take on the role of their rescuer. Encourage them to take action, make changes, and take responsibility for their own happiness. You can't change their life for them, but you can help them realize that they have the power to change it themselves. When I began to understand the depth of the negative energy that toxic people can bring into your life, I realized the importance of protecting my own peace. It wasn't enough just to recognize the warning signs. I had to actively take steps to protect myself. These steps have been transformative, not just in dealing with difficult individuals, but in ensuring that my emotional and mental health remained intact. The process, though, wasn't always easy, but by consistently applying the principles of awareness and self-compassion, I began to notice profound changes in how I interacted with others and, more importantly, in how I valued myself. The first and most essential step is setting boundaries, something I didn't fully understand for a long time. Boundaries are often misconceived as a way to distance ourselves from others, as though we're pushing people away or building walls around our hearts. But what I came to realize is that boundaries are a form of self-care and respect. They're not walls, but rather guidelines that help people understand how to treat us and what we are willing to tolerate. I found that when I started setting clear boundaries, I wasn't only protecting myself from the toxic influences of others, I was teaching them how to interact with me in a way that honored my needs and my peace. It was a process that required patience and a certain level of discomfort, especially when the person involved was someone I deeply cared about. I had to learn how to say no without feeling guilty, how to stand up for myself without feeling selfish. In Buddhism, the concept of non-attachment is often emphasized. This doesn't mean detaching emotionally from everything, but rather understanding that our sense of self-worth does not depend on the approval or treatment of others. I began to apply this to my relationships, recognizing that by setting boundaries, I wasn't rejecting the person, but instead, I was rejecting the toxic behavior. The second tool that became invaluable to me in protecting my peace was meditation. Meditation is a practice that allows us to step back and observe our thoughts, emotions, and surroundings without getting caught up in them. In moments of chaos, when I felt the pressure of someone else's negativity weighing on me, I would retreat into the stillness of meditation. It became my anchor, something I could always rely on to help me regain my balance. What meditation taught me was the power of detachment. It didn't mean I was indifferent or uncaring, but rather that I could maintain my own sense of peace and not let the emotional turbulence of others affect me. In a way, meditation allowed me to be present with others without being consumed by their energy. It also gave me the clarity to discern when someone's presence was draining me and when it was time to step back and recharge. With regular practice, I noticed that I became less reactive and more mindful in my interactions with people, especially those who had the potential to drain my energy. Mindfulness became the core of my approach to dealing with toxic individuals. I learned to stay present with my emotions and notice when someone's negativity started to influence my mood or my thoughts. The beauty of mindfulness is that it offers us the space to respond rather than react. I could feel the discomfort rise within me, but instead of allowing it to take over, I would observe it. In that moment, I could choose how to respond, whether it was to step away, stay calm, or even engage with compassion. The more I practiced mindfulness, the more I was able to maintain my sense of peace, regardless of the external circumstances. Another vital aspect of protecting myself was the people I surrounded myself with. Zen teachings emphasize the importance of the company we keep. Just as a plant needs sunlight, water, and proper care to thrive, so too do our hearts and minds need nurturing relationships in order to flourish. I realized that the energy I was around had a profound impact on my own energy. Being around negative, toxic people drained me, whereas spending time with supportive, kind-hearted individuals uplifted me. This didn't always mean cutting people out of my life completely, but it did mean being more mindful of who I allowed into my personal space. It became clear that the more I spent time with people who shared my values, people who were uplifting, positive, and compassionate, the more my own energy mirrored that. I felt lighter, happier, and more at ease. I began to realize that I had the power to choose who I allowed into my life, and I had every right to protect my peace by distancing myself from those whose energy was harmful. It's important to recognize that surrounding yourself with positive energy isn't about being judgmental or exclusive. It's about recognizing that we all carry energy, and we are all influenced by the people we spend time with. By surrounding myself with individuals who inspired me, who lifted me up, and who shared a similar desire for personal growth, I began to feel a stronger sense of fulfillment and peace. I understood that true healing comes from being in environments that nurture the spirit, and it is in such spaces that we can find the strength to grow and thrive. It wasn't always easy to enforce these boundaries, and there were times when I felt conflicted about distancing myself from certain people, especially those who had been part of my life for a long time. But with time, I began to see that protecting my peace was not only an act of self-care, but also an act of compassion. The more I embraced these practices, the more I began to understand that by setting boundaries and surrounding myself with positive energy, I wasn't just protecting myself, I was also creating a space where I could show up as my most authentic self. This process isn't about creating walls or running away from difficult situations. It's about cultivating awareness and understanding that we have the right to protect our mental and emotional well-being. We are responsible for our own peace, and while we can't always control the actions of others, we can control how we respond and how we choose to engage. By embracing mindfulness, meditation, and the support of loving relationships, we can navigate the complexities of life with grace and strength. Remember, you have the power to protect your energy. You are worthy of peace, and you are deserving of love and respect. By setting boundaries with compassion, practicing mindfulness, and surrounding yourself with positive energy, you create a life that nurtures your soul and allows you to thrive, free from the influence of toxic people. As we wrap up today's discussion, I want to take a moment to remind you of something incredibly powerful. You have the ability to protect your peace. Throughout this video, we've explored the 9 signs that someone may be affecting your energy in harmful ways. And while those signs can be unsettling, there is immense strength in recognizing them. Once you become aware of these patterns, you hold the key to changing your circumstances and creating a life that is more aligned with positivity, peace, and love. It's not always easy to distance ourselves from toxic individuals, especially when they are close to us. But remember, as we learned from Zen and Buddhist teachings, our inner peace is not a luxury, it's a necessity. When we allow toxic energy into our lives, we risk losing that peace. And when we protect it, we create space for more happiness, growth, and fulfillment. We are not just protecting ourselves, but we are also taking responsibility for our well-being. which in turn empowers us to show up as the best version of ourselves. I hope this video has offered you some valuable insights into how to navigate difficult relationships with mindfulness and compassion. If you've learned something today or feel inspired to take a closer look at your own relationships, I'd love to hear about it. Have you encountered any of the signs we talked about? How did you handle those situations? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. I truly believe that we can all learn from each other's stories. And of course, if you found this content helpful, please take a moment to like and subscribe so you never miss an opportunity to learn more about living a life that's filled with peace, purpose, and mindfulness. I'm so grateful to have you here on this journey with me, and I look forward to sharing more wisdom with you in future videos. As you move forward today, remember, you have the power to choose who you allow into your life. Protect your peace with love, kindness, and wisdom, and surround yourself with those who nurture your growth. Take care of yourself, and continue to embrace the beauty of a life well lived. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.